You know, you think you're like over things or beyond things or whatever, but it's usually when you're like leveling up, doing something really uncomfortable, you don't get like a tap, like, hey, I think you have a little insecurity. It's like, hey, the whole gang's here. Guess what? We're going to stop you from doing this. Hey, I'm Jen.
Hey, I'm Suzanne.
Hey, friend. Today we are talking about asking people to show up for you. So to get us into this one, the backstory is it's actually about this podcast, and we hired a production company. And when we were on our webinar, you and I were sitting there, and she's like, okay, talking about the launch, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to have a launch party. And immediately my body like froze. And I could tell you got uncomfortable and I got uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, okay, like a party? Like, I don't really understand. And then I think I called you after we got off of that.
You did?
And I was like, a party? Like a party for ourselves? Like, do you feel weird about that? I don't know. I don't even remember what I said to you because I was like so triggered.
Yeah.
Do you remember me calling you?
Oh, I absolutely do, because I think I was just as triggered as you, because this was not something that either of us were comfortable with.
Totally. I was going to say, and the whatever we decided on was like, neither of us thought it was a good idea. We're like, yeah, that's not for us. Like, this is about healing. Like, we shouldn't be having a party. It's not a celebration, whatever. So then now I'm sitting at my kitchen table. This is a few days later. And my husband and I are talking about, what's going on with the podcast or whatever. And he says to me, well, when are we having the launch party? And I immediately froze again.
Crickets.
Yeah.
Tumbleweed.
And he's like, hello, doing the, because he was like in the other room and I was sitting at the kitchen table. And so I go, well, I just decided that I don't want to throw a party for myself. And then he had crickets. And he gets up and he walks over and he's like, could I give you a different perspective on this? And as we know, when your words are used against you, I was like,
dang it.
I will say, I did say after I said, I don't want to throw a party for myself, but like, I'm open to discussing it. I did say, because I think my reaction was so strong, I was even doubting my own reaction, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
And so I added that at the end. And so when he said, can I offer you a different perspective? And I was like, sure. But just so we're clear, I'm literally like frozen at the kitchen table with my computer open. Like, oh my gosh, he's going to convince me to do this thing. Like, I'm not doing this thing. And he says to me, so it's not a party for yourself. And I'm like, how is it not a party for myself? I'm inviting everyone over. And he says, no.
With all your defensiveness.
Yeah, exactly. You could see it if you're watching YouTube. And so I was like, well, who wants to come over? Like, I'm not inviting people over to what? And he's like, well, you're starting a podcast to help people, to serve people. You're starting a business. You and your sister are being really vulnerable and sharing things that are hopefully going to help other people. You're getting super outside your comfort zone. You're doing this big, huge thing. The party has nothing to do with you except you're the person doing it. And I was like, oh, well, when you put it that way. And he's like, we're not like renting out a place and doing this whole thing. He's like, we'll have people over. We'll have the people that care about you and love you and know what you've been through and are just so excited that like you're using all of your yuckiness for good. And I was like, immediately my body was relaxing. I mean, I still had the zing of like, because, okay, that's all fine and dandy. But then I was like, well, I mean, who, like, should I even invite guys? Because, like, I don't know. Would they even want? I mean, just all of the defenses were just
firing.
They're coming in hot. I was getting hot. I'm getting hot just talking about it. And so he was like, hey, what makes you think people aren't going to show up? And I was like, well, I don't know. They just like have better things to do. Like nobody needs to come over here for that.
What is so crazy to me sitting here listening to you and staring at your face is also, I swear it was almost identical reactions, which we don't have identical reactions very often to things.
We really don't.
You are talking about all the things. I mean, even after you and Jason had this conversation.
Yeah.
You called me, didn't come over since you're in Texas and I'm in California, but essentially we feel that way sometimes. I remember you're like, so I think I'm going to have a party. And me, all those same responses just came right rushing back, even when you were speaking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think like you said, when we have that strong of a reaction, we both now know to say, So let's focus on your reaction.
I was going to say, so there was the reaction. So we've talked about the reaction. And then Jason had tried to give me a little shift of perspective. And so in this case, I kind of went like backwards because he gave me the shift. And then I had to go back to discovery because
how did he give you the shift?
When he was just explaining what the party was for. Like when he countered my, I'm not throwing a party for myself with, it's not really
my party,
about.
I'll cry if I want to.
Exactly. So he gave me the shift and then I had to sit with it because he wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
And then I had to sit there and think and I was like, well, why don't I want to have a party?
Mm-hmm.
And what comes up for me from our childhood is like, you can't be seen. First of all, do not shine. That takes away from everyone else. So that came in hot for me. And what if nobody shows up? Like, I don't want to bother people. I don't want to make them feel obligated to come to this party about my thing. So all of these things are like,
So let me ask you, because it just popped into my head. Do you think that there's any concern that they wouldn't show up because now you're having to trust people to show up for you?
Maybe a little bit, but it's really not about them showing up or not as much as it was about inconveniencing people or making myself important or asking them to show up.
So shining a light on yourself.
Yes, being seen and then asking other people to see me and show up. Also, from our childhood, not well received.
Also, do you think that you're a little worried about what they think about you when they showed up? Like a little bit of that perfectionism to be like, you're doing this podcast and it's very vulnerable. And like you said, should I invite guys? And it's like somehow guys aren't vulnerable or don't understand these things or.
Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah, it was so many things. And also just the idea of like, oh, we came to your launch and like, I don't know, just the idea of like, what if it doesn't work out?
I was just going to say success, failure.
Success, failure. Yeah. She showed up. I mean, the whole.
She showed up. Yeah.
I always say like inner child Jen, like all the versions, like they all came to play. And I will say, even though it happens often, you think you're like over things or beyond things or whatever, but it's usually when you're like leveling up, doing something really uncomfortable, you don't get like a tap, like, hey, I think you have a little insecurity. It's like, hey, the whole gang's here. Guess what? We're going to stop you from doing this. And that's how I feel with the podcast because it's just so far out there. And then I was thinking about like Mel Robbins always is like the let them theory, which I have loved even before she wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is like this is what I realized. I'm making the decision for my people, like my friends, my family, my acquaintances. Like I'm making the decision for them. And that is so messed up. Like, I'm not even giving them the opportunity to be part of it. I don't even know if they want to be part of it. Nothing, because I'm having no communication. I'm just shutting down and being like, I'm not throwing a party for myself. And the truth of the matter is, I can invite all the people and tell them what I'm doing. And either they show up or they don't. But it's not a reflection of me. It's just a reflection of like their priorities, their time commitments, a bunch of other things that have nothing to do with me, which is still a really hard concept.
And I think, too, you're not giving them the opportunity. And how mad would we be at our friend who wouldn't give us the opportunity to support them?
And that was the other question I asked myself, which I have to do a lot when the whole gang of the inner kids come. Is to say to myself, what if, said friend was thrown, like, and I do it like a really good friend. I'll do like an acquaintance friend. I'll do, like I'll go like the kind of the layers of friends.
Yeah, the
right?
categories.
Yeah. And I'll say, well, like, what if they were launching a podcast and they invited me to a podcast launch? I would be like, oh my God, that's so amazing. How do you even do that? This is like, I absolutely will support
you even got your
like,
neck going there.
Yeah. I'm like, wow. Yeah. I'll do the thing for you, girl.
Yeah.
Whether it was my good friend, an acquaintance, like I would be so excited. Now, if I had a prior commitment and couldn't go, it is not a reflection of the fact that I'm not super excited for them. And maybe I can't go to the party, but I'm like, how can I help? What would help you? Do you want me to share it? Do you want me to subscribe? Like, tell me how to help you because I want you to be successful. So why do I think that everyone else is going to feel so differently than I feel? Now, it's not to say 100% of the people are going to feel that way.
Sure.
Who cares? Sure. You don't need 100% of the people.
Yeah. But it's all your internal thoughts. I mean, that's why we're doing this, right, people? It's your internal thoughts. They're not rational most of the time. And I think that leads me to, friend, here's kind of your question of the day. What Jen was just describing was her inner child wounds, right? Those things that are upsetting, that jump up at you. And have you experienced anything like that this week where it's popped up and you thought, that was interesting? If so, take a look. That's what we're doing here. We're taking a look. All right?
Yes.
So, well, thank you so much. That's it for today.
Hope you discovered something about yourself in my throwing a party for myself story.
See you next time. Same place, same sisterhood. Bye.
Bye.